9 out of every 10. That is the ratio. For every 10 Russian soldiers sent toward Ukraine's front lines, 9 will never make it to the fighting. Not because the enemy outguns them at the trenches, not because the front collapses in a single catastrophic push. They die before they ever see an opponent, before they fire a single round, before they even know what killed them. Kotonox, a Russian war correspondent, admitted this last week in a single devastating sentence. When his words reached Moscow, the capital fell silent. He said 80 to 90% of personnel casualties occurred during the advance toward the contact line. Not at the contact line, not in the firefight, on the approach, marching, moving, exposed, erased. That number is not a statistic. It's an X-ray of a war's new logic. And it raises a question that cannot be ignored. What is killing Russia's soldiers before Ukraine's even fires? If questions like this one are the kind you find yourself turning over long after the story ends, you are exactly the audience this work is made for. Subscribing takes 1 second, and it means the next story finds you, not the other way around. And when you are done, leave a thought below. Often, it's the conversation in the comments that reveals what history will remember. For centuries, military history held to one rule. The line is where soldiers die. Waterloo, Verdun, Stalingrad, the contact line, where two armies meet, where the outcome is decided by courage, steel, and the weight of numbers. That rule held until Ukraine. The ground has shifted beneath the doctrine itself. Death now is not at the line, it's on the road to the line. According to Frontline observers in Donbass, the very concept of a front has dissolved. No more a clean, straight boundary. Instead, a zone, sometimes 150 kilometers deep, where the attacker becomes the hunted. In this new geography, what you cannot see can kill you, and what you do not suspect already has. For 200 years, Russia's military relied on a single formula: send more men, accept heavy losses, overwhelm by force of numbers. It worked in Leningrad. It worked in Berlin. The price was always high, but the result was predictable. Yet in Ukraine, that formula collapsed. In the first year alone, Russia suffered more casualties than in all its post-World War II conflicts combined. The Afghan War, Chechnya, all eclipsed. By the first quarter of 2026, Russia lost 316 soldiers for every square kilometer taken in Donetsk. The year before, it was 120. Daily gains shrank from nearly 15 kilometers in late 2024 to just over 5 in 2026. Fewer advances, exponentially higher losses. Even Russian commanders sounded the alarm. Alexander Khodakovsky, a Donbass veteran, warned that large-scale attacks would multiply losses 8-fold. The strategy's core assumption, overwhelming numbers arrive at the line, was gone. The force never even arrives. The question then, how did Ukraine make an army melt before the battle even began? The answer is not just drones. It is something more systematic, more quietly revolutionary. In 2022, FPV drones had a range of 5 to 7 kilometers. By 2023, a corridor of death stretched 10 kilometers deep. It was narrow, but it worked. If Russian armor punched through, the old numbers game resumed. But then came the leap. In late 2024, fiber optic drones appeared, operating on light, invisible to electronic warfare, untouchable by jamming. 40-kilometer cables became standard. 50 was possible. By 2025, the death zone was 40 kilometers deep, confirmed by independent analysts. No longer a strip, now a landscape. Putin's forces adapted, first with motorcycles, then infantry squads, then forest infiltration. Each adaptation brought diminishing returns. Armor sat farther back. Men advanced in smaller, more vulnerable groups. The numbers still came, but they came in fragments. In early 2026, Ukraine's new Deep Strike Command Center began orchestrating these tools. Coordination depth, 150 kilometers. But the system is not yet complete. As former U.S. Special Forces operator Brian Pickens noted, the key gap is in the 30 to 100 kilometer range. Ukraine's innovation is closing this gap, racing against time and resources. The window is closing faster than anyone realized. But before a drone even takes flight, someone gives a coordinate. Where does that come from? A Russian unit moves through a tree line at night, clouds above, hidden from human eyes. But satellite radar, synthetic aperture, immune to darkness and cloud, spots the motion. Companies like ISI, Capella, IQPS feed Ukraine near real-time intelligence. Starlink's internet backbone connects every unit. One ground team is hit, another seamlessly steps in. The command system isn't in a distant headquarters. It lives in the field, shifting, adapting. Add NATO's signals intelligence. If a Russian brigade headquarters opens a radio channel, it is decoded before the message ends. The relevant fragment is in Kyiv's hands before the sender blinks. So, a Russian soldier on a muddy road is not facing one enemy. Three eyes are always watching: satellite, signals, drone. Russia is not fighting Ukraine alone. It is fighting the entire Western sensor ecosystem. Yet, technology alone is not the full story. Ukraine's new death geography is fused with something older: terrain knowledge, born from centuries of defense. The defender knows every valley, every swamp, every blind hill. This asymmetry has defeated superpowers before. Finland's woods stalled the Soviets. Vietnam's jungles broke the Americans. Afghanistan's mountains bled the Soviets and the US alike. But in the past, the defender could not see the enemy until it was nearly too late. Now, Ukraine blends ancient terrain mastery with modern sensors. The result is a digital swamp. Napoleon's army was swallowed by Russian marshes, Hitler's by Russian winter. Now, Russian soldiers are swallowed by Ukraine's digital swamp, a weapon built from both history and invention. A Russian group enters a tree line. Ukraine knows every tree, every dip in the ground. Synthetic radar scans from above. Starlink relays coordinates in seconds. FPV drones strike silently. Mines wait at the edges. Recon units and artillery layer the attack. 4 threats converge on a single squad. Soldiers caught in 3 out of 4 vanish without a trace. The paradox is brutal. Russia's doctrine, built on numbers and the logic of overwhelming force, is now turned against it. Ukraine took the old advantage and dressed it in new technology. Russia is trapped in its own history, unable to change course. The battlefield measures this difference mercilessly. 4 years is not a short time. Why did Russia not respond? 3 reasons, each damning. First, industrial culture. Ukraine's distributed approach, thousands of small workshops, rapid, iterative updates, is alien to Russian industry. Ukrainian FPVs receive 3 updates in 3 months. Russian equivalents, only 1. Second, decision-making. To change doctrine is to admit failure. Putin's legitimacy depends on victory. Bad news is suppressed. Honest feedback is punished. Officers who speak out risk their careers. Third, human cost. The soldiers dying are not children of Moscow's elite. They come from distant provinces, prisons, the poor. Their deaths are invisible to the regime. The doctrine only changes when those paying the price can demand it. But those paying are on the muddy roads, not at the Kremlin's table. What came next would prove that everything the generals believed about their own army was already crumbling beneath them. Picture a 2026 Russian contract soldier. He is not from Moscow's glass towers. He is from Buryatia, Dagestan, rural Siberia. He signs up for money to pay a debt, buy a house, fund a child's education. His training lasts a month, maybe less. He is given an AKM or AK-74, models from the 1960s. No training in counter-drone tactics, no experience in death geography. His only mission is to walk toward the line. No one tells him the line is just a graveyard now. In an interview with a Russian prisoner of war, the scene is nightmarish. Men lose their minds. Some shoot themselves rather than advance. Russian war blogger Alexei Sukhankin writes, "Commanders are spending new recruits like a renewable resource. Mobilization will not save the situation. The numbers are relentless." In March 2026, Russia lost over 35,000 soldiers in a single month, a new record. Drones caused 96% of those casualties. Artillery and small arms accounted for just 4%. Drones no longer support the war, they are the war. And the most devastating equation. In the first quarter of 2026, Russia conscripted 80,000 soldiers, but lost over 90,000. For the first time in history, the loss rate outpaces recruitment. Desertion numbers neared 70,000 last year. Soldiers are not a resource. They are fuel, burned, spent, replaced. But now, the bottom of the fuel tank is visible. Three frontline voices, Kotnox, Khodorkovsky, Sukhankin, each reached the same conclusion. The strategy cannot win. None of them are anti-war. All want Russia to prevail, but all agree the regime's doctrine has collapsed. In just 2 weeks, dozens of Russian military bloggers unleashed criticism, including million-subscriber channels like Rybar. The offensive is at a dead end. Command is hiding losses. Mobilization is pointless. The Kremlin's answer? Silence, then repression. Blogger Ilya Remeslo described the war as hopeless and called Putin illegitimate. The next night, he was confined to a psychiatric hospital, one notorious for Soviet-era punishments. Legitimacy erosion starts slow, then accelerates. Now, the acceleration is visible. Two invisible clocks now tick. Russia's clock, erosion. Every month, losses deepen, desertions rise, the demographic crater widens, internal voices multiply. Erosion will, at some unknowable moment, become collapse. Ukraine's clock, resources, drone production, Starlink support, allied intelligence, each measurable, each targeted. Which clock runs out first? That is the question that keeps strategists awake at night. That single sentence, 90% die before reaching the front, was not just a number. Beneath it, a two-century doctrine collapsed, a new death geography rose, revolt voices multiplied, and two clocks began ticking. No clock ticks forever. The criticism didn't remain social media noise. It moved to official halls. Grigory Yurov, a 69-year-old deputy from the Samara Duma, stood and said, "We are jointly responsible with Putin for the failure of the special military operation. He doesn't want to stop the aggression because he doesn't want to go down in history as a defeated president." His microphone was cut within seconds, but his words had already escaped, shattering the silence in the room. Deeper still, this spark of courage was lit months before in St. Petersburg at the small Minsko City Council. Councilors submitted a petition to remove Putin for treason, citing military destruction, demographic catastrophe, economic collapse, and strategic defeat. They knew the Duma would never try Putin. Their aim was to light a torch. And they did. When criticism comes from politicians, the system is threatened. When it comes from the military itself, the foundation shakes. Colonel General Vladimir Churkin, a pillar of the Russian military, made a historic confession on national radio. "We have learned a serious and harsh lesson." He blamed intelligence services for feeding the Kremlin fantasies that 70% of Ukrainians would welcome them. He mocked the so-called gesture of goodwill that was, in truth, a crushing defeat. In Russia, where war critics face 15-year sentences and 21,000 have been jailed since 2022, no one dared arrest him. This is how the wall of fear crumbles. First in whispers, then in confessions, then in action. That single decision set off a chain of events that most observers still have not fully mapped, and the consequences are still unfolding today. The breaking point has passed. There is no return to the old doctrine, no way to undo the death geography. What remains is the reckoning. The losses are not just numbers. They are families, towns, entire regions hollowed out. The demographic crater left by this war will last for generations. The Russian army, once feared for its endless reserves, now faces a recruitment crisis. Mobilization can no longer keep up. The regime's legitimacy is eroding, not just among the elites, but in the ranks, in the provinces, in the silence of mothers and fathers who no longer believe what they are told. The war's cost is not only immediate, it is strategic. Every month the offensive stalls, every battalion lost, every commander silenced. The probability of catastrophic collapse increases. And what was made impossible? A quick victory, a negotiated settlement, even a stable retreat. What was made inevitable? More loss, more desertion, the slow but steady unraveling of a regime that cannot admit its own doctrine has died. The deeper principle revealed here is as old as war itself. The side that adapts not just to the enemy, but to the shape of the battlefield itself wins. Terrain, technology, doctrine, each matters. But the true weapon is the ability to blend them, to see what others do not, to let go of what no longer works. The question worth sitting with is not whether this outcome was avoidable. It is whether any institution involved had the incentive or even the capacity to prevent it. What do you see when you look at these unfolding events? Share your perspective in the comments below. The conversation that follows may be the first draft of what history will one day record.